English people, you're so desperate to experience racism that when I ask you what racism you've experienced, you go silent. So let me actually tell you about the racism you have actually experienced as people. In 2001, Ross Parker was murdered by a gang of Asian youth in a racially motivated attack. The murder of Chris Donald in 2004 was determined to be a racially motivated hate crime where he was abducted, beaten and murdered by a group of Pakistani men. The savage and barbaric murder of this poor 15-year-old boy still to this day remains one of the most prolific cases of racism against a white person in the UK. The murder of Christopher Yates in the same year was also deemed to be racially motivated, where he was beaten to death by a group of Asian youths. In 2022, Gavin Hopley was also killed after sustaining massive head injuries after being attacked by a group of Asian males. However, it has been alleged and not proven that this was actually a racist attack. It is now important to note that P-bashing was a massive part of British culture at this time. Huge groups of white youths or even white neighbours would purposefully look out for people of Asian descent to violently assault them. This was very reminiscent in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. These are the only crimes I could find against white English people where they were the victims of racial crimes historically and presently, where the perpetrator of the crime was somebody or a group of people of a completely different colour. Where you seem to misunderstand racism is that you just see colour. You see one person of one colour and one person of another, and you assume that racism is the reason why they have conflict. If it is a racial crime, there needs to be the intent of racism towards that person's skin tone and ethnicity to make it a race crime. Otherwise, it could just be a conflict of two different types of people. So when the absolutely abhorrent and shocking murder of Lee Rigby in broad daylight is brought into the conversation, the motivation was not racism. The criminal who actually did this was a Nigerian man, and he said his motivation was because of Allah. So it meant it was not a racial crime, it was more to do with his religious beliefs. And when it comes to the absolutely tragic murder of the 3 girls in Southport, again, the motivation was not racism. The perpetrator of the crime had a severe obsession with genocide and violent murders. English people, you have to understand that racism at its most basic level is about the colour of your skin. But on a deeper level, it is about fear, insecurity, jealousy and control. The British Empire ran on race, racism and racial hierarchy, and this is why this is at the forefront of English minds. It is so embedded into the culture and community, whereas other cultures do not function that way. And this is why telling the truth about history is important, English people, because the brutality of the British Empire did affect a lot of people, and I think you know and understand that, but you have this internal fear that this is going to happen to you also, when that's actually not the case. The Ottoman Empire is one of the examples that you bring up. However, the Ottoman Empire did not function on racism. There were 1.5 million Europeans that were